Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum everyone. I hope you're all doing fine. Today we are going to start off with our lecture number 2, and we begin with the basic objectives of this lecture. First of all, I'm going to tell you what we're going to do today. First one is reading comprehension skills. Some of the reading comprehension skills that we talked about in the previous lecture, we'll quickly revise them, and then we are going to talk about previewing, reading for main idea, making inferences, and drawing conclusions. These are also 3 very important reading comprehension skills that help you understand the text that you've been given to read, to preview it before actually reading it, how to understand looking at the layout, looking at the headings and topic and everything, reading for main idea, and making inferences and drawing conclusions. These are the 3 skills that we are going to talk about along with the examples. And then we have some very comprehensive reading comprehension exercises for today's lecture that we are going to do. You're going to read the passages, then you're going to look at the questions, and you will answer the questions first yourself, and then I'm going to explain why there is a need to look at the passage in a way that you understand it completely. So moving on, let's begin with our first skill, that is previewing. Previewing a text means gathering as much information about the text as you can before you actually read it. You can ask yourself the following questions. Now, as the name suggests, it's previewing. Looking at the passage for the first time, what knowledge you gather by the layout, how the passage is divided into paragraphs, the topic sentences of paragraphs, and the title of the passage. So let's quickly see what questions you can ask yourself to help understand previewing skill in reading comprehension. The first one is, what is my purpose for reading? Are you asked to summarize a particular piece of writing? These are the questions that you need to ask yourself when you are applying the skill of previewing on your reading comprehension skill. If you are asked to summarize the passage, what are you supposed to look at? Are you looking for the thesis statement or main idea? Thesis statement means the main idea or the gist of the passage, what the passage is about. Or if you are asked to look for the main idea, how you have to do that. Or are you being asked to respond to a piece? Responding to a piece means that you are supposed to critically analyze that piece, write something about it creatively, and tell the reader or the examiner or your teacher, what do you think about this particular piece of writing? If you're supposed to do so. If so, you may want to be conscious of what you already know about the topic and how you arrived at that opinion. Sometimes just previewing gives you half of the idea of what the passage is about. That is, with the help of the title, with the help of the topic sentences of paragraphs. Sometimes just reading the first and last paragraph of the passage, you understand what the passage is basically about. You can easily summarize it, or you can tell what the main idea was, or you can even respond critically to the passage in a very short way. The next question that you need to ask yourself is, what can the title tell me about the text? Now, as I told you, previewing also involves looking at the title, trying to understand what the title tells you even before you actually read the passage. Before you read, look at the title of the text. What clues does it give you about the piece of writing? Good writers usually try to make their titles work to help readers grasp meaning of the text from the reader's first glance at it. Now, most of the writers, when they write, they make their titles very communicative. Sometimes it is a question. It means that if the title is a question, it means that the passage would be about something that is debatable, something that does not have an answer as yet, and maybe the reader is asked to read and give their opinion about that question. And sometimes the title tells you that the passage might be about something informative, something scientific, something that is a social issue. It can be a biography. By just looking at the title, you can understand that. So a title helps you in getting the basic idea of the passage under the skill of previewing. Next question that you need to ask yourself is, who is the author? Now, sometimes it happens that you read a passage that has been written by an author that you already know, that you are very familiar with. You might like the writings that they produce. Maybe you have studied them very closely. So it becomes very easy for you to read that passage again and understand it easily and quickly, because you know the author's style, their way of writing, their way of approaching a particular subject or aspect or idea. So you already have a basic or previous knowledge about the author or their style. So it gets you into a better position to understand the passage easily. If you have heard the author's name before, what comes to your mind in terms of their reputation or stance on the issue you are reading about? So some writers have particular themes that they have talked about in their writing. So when you come to know about the author, you understand that this particular author has written on these themes. So it's easier for you to infer or get an idea about the theme of that passage that you haven't even read yet. So has the author written other things of which you are aware? So if you already have read something about something written by that author, so it becomes easier for you to get this particular piece of writing easily. How does the piece in front of you fit into the author's body of work? So this also helps a lot, because if you already know what the author's style is, you can easily put this particular piece of writing that you've given at that moment to that style and understand what would be the stylistic features and what particular themes the writer might have talked about, how they have approached the subject. So it gets you in a better position to understand the passage. And the last question that you need to ask yourself in previewing is, how is the text structured? It's the layout of the text that gives answers to some very important questions as well. Sometimes the structure of a piece can give you important clues to its meaning. Be sure to read all section headings carefully. Now, sometimes your reading comprehension passage is divided into paragraphs, and the paragraphs have headings. So going through those headings gives you almost 50 to 70% of idea what the passage is about. So you can easily summarize it into a very small sentence or a paragraph what the passage is about. So it is always necessary, imperative to go through all the section headings while you are doing this. Also, reading the opening sentences of paragraphs should give you a good idea of the main ideas contained in the piece. As I just said earlier as well, that the topic sentences of paragraphs give you very clear idea what the passage is about. So always go through them when you have to or when you are asked to summarize the passage or quickly tell the main idea of the passage. So it's the tip that is that you can just go through the section headings, paragraph headings, or if there are no headings for the paragraphs, you can just go through the first and last sentence of each paragraph. So that gives you quite a fair idea what the passage is about. So these are the 4 important questions that you ask under the heading of previewing, and they help you understand what the passage can be or will be about even before actually reading it. So we are going to apply these skills to the upcoming activities, and we'll see how you understand them and how you can actually use them. The next skill that we are going to talk about is reading for main idea. Most of the times when you are given a passage to read and comprehend, or reading comprehension passages that you are given, one of the important questions that it has is that you have to give the main idea of the passage. What is the passage about? It's just not structured as question number 1, what is the main idea of the passage. It can be in some other way, it can be put in some other way, but basically it is asking about a very brief summary of what the passage is about, the main idea, the gist, the thesis statement, or what do you understand by the passage. It can be put like this as well. So it is one very important skill that is used to comprehend a reading passage easily. So let's see what you have to do, how you actually understand the main idea of a passage. The main idea of a passage or reading is the central thought or message. As you all know, it's the main idea, it's the main thought, it's the central idea or concept that the person is talking about. In contrast to the term topic, which refers to the subject under discussion, the term main idea refers to the point or thought being expressed. So when you are asked about the topic, it is the subject that is being discussed in the reading comprehension passage. As compared to that, main idea refers to the point of thought being expressed, what particular thought or idea you are expressing. Sometimes the topic is social issues, but we don't know what about social issues. You have to go through the whole passage, what particularly are they talking about, whether they are talking about the negative aspect of certain social issues, or they're just generally talking about all the social issues that are prevalent in one particular area, or they're just saying what impact social issues have on our lives, on our daily lives as a student, as a housewife, or a person, anyone for that matter. So this is the difference between topic and main idea. Now these are the three important reading tips while trying to understand the main idea of a passage. As soon as you can define the topic, ask yourself what general point does the author want to make about this topic. Now you know the topic by looking at the title of the passage, but what about that title? What is it that the author is talking about? What particularly he is throwing light on in that particular passage, and what general point is being discussed? That's what you need to know. Once you can answer that question, you have more than likely found the main idea. This is the question that you have to answer, and then you can easily say that this is the main idea of the passage. Most main ideas are stated or suggested early on in a reading passage. Pay special attention to the first third of any passage, article or chapter. The first third part, or if you divide the passage into three parts, the first part, that is the one in which you can mostly find a stated or suggested main idea. So pay special attention to that part. That's where you're likely to get the best statement or clearest expression of the main idea. Now sometimes it happens that the main idea is repeated over and over again in different words, in different ways throughout the passage. So it's easier for you to understand it by just skimming and scanning through the whole passage. Not scanning, just skimming most of the times, because you know what skimming is. It's just a skill that is used to go through the passage quickly to get the main idea. So that is also one skill that you can apply here to understand what the main idea of the passage can be. And the last one is pay attention to any idea that is repeated in different ways. As I just said, the ideas that are repeated are mostly closely related to the main idea of the passage. If an author returns to the same thought in several different sentences or paragraphs, that idea is the main or central thought under discussion. So it's as easy as that. If a thought is repeated over and over again in different styles, different ways, with examples, by relating it to the author's own experience or any other way, that means that this particular idea is something that is important to the writer, important to the author. So that is why they are repeating it. So that can be your main idea. So these are the three important things with which you can easily understand the main idea of the passage. Now the last important reading comprehension skill is making inferences and drawing conclusions. Inference basically means to try to gather or understand the thought that is not clearly stated in the passage. You have to infer, that is, you have to try to understand or guess the thought or idea that is not clearly written or stated in the passage. Reading with purpose and meaning, kinds and examples. That's what we are going to talk about. Making inferences and drawing conclusions has 3-4 different examples, 3-4 different ways with which you can do that, and we are going to talk about that. With the help of general sense, you can mostly make inference or draw a conclusion with the help of general sense of the meaning. Look at this example. Murderers are usually incarcerated for longer periods of time than robbers. Now we have a comparison between murderers here and robbers, and we are being told that they are murderers are incarcerated for longer periods of time than robbers. Now, what is it that is done to both murderers and robbers, but murderers get a longer incarceration as compared to robbers? Because murderers, what they do is more dangerous, more aggressive, and more cruel. So, incarcerated, you can guess the meaning. That is what is making inference. With the help of the surrounding language, you can easily infer or understand the meaning of the word that is underlined. Now, you can understand this by asking yourself the question that what usually happens to those who are found guilty of murdering someone? They are sentenced. Yes, incarcerated means they are imprisoned. They are sentenced to imprisonment, or they are sentenced to death, or any other imprisonment or punishment that they are given by the court of law. So incarcerated here means imprisoned, kept in prison. You all know that robbers are kept in prison for a lesser period of time as compared to murderers. Now, second example is with the help of examples. Sometimes the meaning of a word can be inferred, or an idea can be understood properly with the help of an example given right in that particular sentence. This example gives us a very clear idea of what I'm talking about. Those who enjoy belonging to clubs, going to parties, and inviting friends often to their homes for dinner are gregarious. Now, this is the word that you have to guess or infer the meaning of, and the meaning is there in the sentence. It's with the help of the example that you're supposed to understand it. Those people are gregarious who enjoy belonging to clubs, number one, who like having parties, who invite friends often to their homes for dinner. Now, what do you understand by this example or this definition that the gregarious people might be? Another word for gregarious can be somebody who likes to go to a club, who likes having party, having a lot of people around them, and they invite friends often to dinner at their homes. These people are friendly, social. So gregarious means social or friendly. It was a difficult word that turned out to be easy with the help of the example that was there in the previous part of the sentence, in the sentence early on. Next one is antonyms and contrasts. We talked about the contrast and antonym clues in the first lecture as well. That is how you understand the difficult vocabulary in context. Now, antonyms are words that have opposite meanings, such as happy and sad. Now, example can be Ben is fearless, but his brother is timorous. Now, the context clues that we talked about in contrast and antonyms is but. Now, this word, this conjunction tells you that the upcoming thought would be totally opposite to the previous one. Now, Ben is fearless, but his brother is timorous. Now, timorous, the meaning of timorous would definitely be the opposite of fearless. Somebody who is fearless is brave. Timorous would be a coward. Yes. Timorous is somebody who is very shy, very introvert, who is a little cowardly. They really don't feel like getting into trouble or asking for trouble or having a lot of people around them. So this is what timorous can mean. So you can easily guess the meaning of a word with the help of these antonym and contrast clues. And a contrast in the following sentence implies the meaning of credence. Dad gave credence to my story, but mom's reaction was one of total disbelief. Now again, the contrast clue is but. And this tells us that the meaning of credence would be totally opposite to disbelief. Because dad's reaction is credence, but mom's reaction is disbelief. So what would credence mean? Disbelief means you don't believe the person. The son or daughter said something that the mother does not believe, but the father believes. Exactly. Credence means belief. When you give credit to someone for saying something right, credence is belief. So this was the contrast clue, and with the help of this, we understood the meaning of credence. Now, after these three skills and the combination of the skills that we talked about in lecture number 1, we are going to do some reading comprehension exercises. And these exercises would be available on the portal. You can download them, put them in front of you. You will be given 10 minutes to read the passage, and then we'll go back to the questions and one by one find the answers, and you can write the answers yourself and then see whether your answers were correct or not, and which one was wrong and why it was wrong. Now, before we move on to our first activity, we are going to quickly revise all the skills that we talked about. The first one that we talked about was enhancing your reading comprehension skills. That gave you a set of skills, a long list of skills, in fact, which you can apply to read the passage easily by reading aloud, highlighting the main points, taking short, brief notes on your reading passage, dividing your passage into smaller, easier pieces, and rereading or reading aloud the complicated portions of the passage. Then we talked about the skills of skimming and scanning. Skimming is just going through the passage quickly to get the gist of the passage, and scanning is a skill in which you go back to the passage to find a particular piece of information. And we also talked about the skill of reading for main idea, previewing, and making inferences and drawing conclusions. Now, the first activity that we are going to do is a longer passage. This is about great white sharks. You're going to read the passage. You will be given 10 minutes. Then we come back to the passage, read the questions, and answer the questions one by one. And you can then easily see which one of the questions you got right and which ones wrong. And the ones that are wrong, you can correct them with the help of the explanation that we are going to have at the end. Now that you have read the passage, let's move on to the questions. Read them one by one and find the answers in the passage. I'm going to give you the answer. I'll be very slow so that you can see where we found the answer, what led us to that particular conclusion, and how you can easily improve your reading comprehension skill with the help of this particular exercise. Now, the passage basically is about great white sharks. As I told you earlier, there are some passages that are divided into paragraphs, and there are section headings as well. This is one example of that kind. We have paragraphs that have particular headings, so you can easily understand what the paragraph must be talking about. The first one is description of the great white sharks, and then the second one is diet, what they eat and all that. Then that's a slightly longer one. Then we have range and habitat, where they live, what are the places and the kinds of places that they live all over the world, where they are found. And then reproduction, how they reproduce, and shark attacks. Now, this was a longer passage. We are going to move on to question number 1 and then come back to the passage and find the answer. I hope you have your answers with you. You can tally them with the answers I give you and see if they're right. That's good. If they're not, you should check why you got it wrong. Question number 1 is, which of the following is least likely? Least likely means it's not supposed to happen very easily, that is highly improbable. Finding a great white shark in 85° Fahrenheit water, find a great white shark that weighs 2,000 pounds, find a great white shark hunting a porpoise, and finding a 15-foot long great white shark. Now, these are the 4 things that are the options, and you have to choose one of them that is least likely, that cannot happen. Now, the answer to this one is option A. How did we get to this conclusion? The answer lies in your paragraph of range and habitat. Let's go back to the passage and find the answer. Range and habitat. Great white sharks are most commonly observed throughout the world's subarctic coastal waters. Though they likely spend most of their time in the open ocean, highest concentrations are found in the waters off the coast of South Africa, Australia, California, and Mexico. The great white shark is also found in the Adriatic and Mediterranean seas. They generally prefer water between 54 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is a general description of where the great white sharks are found and why we cannot find a great white shark in the waters that have the temperature of 85 degrees Fahrenheit, because it is written here very clearly that we can mostly find sharks in the water that has 54 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit temperature. Now moving back to the question, let's see what other options are and why they are wrong. That is one very important thing that you might have in your mind. Why is option B, C and D wrong? And why is option A correct? Option A is correct. I just told you why. Option B is wrong. Find a great white shark that weighs 2,000 pounds. Going back to your passage, paragraph number 1. In this third line, we have the largest great white sharks can reach lengths of 22 feet and weigh up to 5,000 pounds. So it's not unlikely. They are saying that is it least likely to find a shark weighing 2,000 pounds? Shark weighs up to 5,000 pounds. So it's not least likely to find a shark that weighs 2,000 pounds. It can be easily found. Most are between 13 and 16 feet and weigh 1,500 to 2,400 pounds. So it is very easy to find a shark that weighs 2,000 pounds. So option B is incorrect. Option C is find a great white shark hunting a porpoise. Now this is least likely because you cannot find the shark actually doing that under the sea, because it's not written in the passage. The sharks do hunt porpoises, but we cannot find them actually doing that because they do it underwater and it's difficult to actually find them doing it. So option C is wrong. Option D, finding a 15-foot long great white shark. This is also least likely because it is written in your paragraph 1 that they most are between 13 and 16 feet and weigh 1,500 and 2,400 pounds. So option A for question number 1 is correct. Question number 2 is the maximum weight of most great white sharks is dash pounds. Now we have to go back to our para number 1 to find the answer to this question. We have already read that most great white sharks weigh up to, we can look at the options, 5,000, 2,400, 24,000, 4,200. Now again, line number 3, the great white sharks can reach lengths of 22 feet and weigh up to 5,000 pounds. Most are between 13 to 16 feet and weigh 1,500 to 2,400 pounds. So mostly they are 2,400 pounds. Why is 2,400 pounds correct? Because the question implies that the maximum weight of most great white sharks. Now look at most, it is written in all capital. That means this is what you have to focus on. Most great white sharks. Going back to the passage, most are between 13 and 16 feet and weigh 1,500 to 2,400 pounds. So instead of 5,000, we will be doing, the correct answer would be 2,400 pounds. So your answer B, option B is correct, and in question number 1, option A was correct. Now moving on to question number 3. Check all of the following that are normal parts of the great white shark's diet. Now the question gives you a very clear idea that you can find the answer to this one in the paragraph of diet in the passage. The paragraph that is titled diet. So that is where you will find the answer. Let's look at the options quickly. Option A is humans, B dolphins, C seals, and D fish. Let's go to the passage and find the answer to this question. We see in the first line, the great white shark normally feeds on fish, seals, dolphins, porpoises, otters and turtles. So we have all three that are in our options list here. So going back to question number 3, your options B, C and D are correct. It's very clearly written under the paragraph of diet that dolphins, seals and fish are a normal part of great white shark's diet. Moving on to question number 4. The dash are specialized pores that allow a shark to detect magnetic fields of moving organisms. For this, you have to go back to the passage and read. Let's quickly read the options. Echolocation, serrations, electromagnetics, ampullae or Lorenzini. Let's go back to the passage and find where the answer lies. Now the answer to this question lies in the paragraph that is titled Diet. Look at line number 3. Like all sharks, great whites have special pores called ampullae or Lorenzini, which enable them to detect the electromagnetic fields radiated by moving organisms. Going to the question, let's see which option is correct. Question number 4, option number D is correct. That is very clearly stated. Question number 5, what does ovoviviparous mean? And the meaning of this could be any one of the options. Let's read the options and then go back to the passage and find the answers. It refers to animals whose young develop in eggs within the mother's body. It refers to animals whose young develop outside the mother's body. It refers to animals that do not lay eggs. It refers to animals that lay eggs. And for this we have to definitely go back to the heading that is reproduction of sharks. That is where we are going to find the answer to this question. Here we are. This is the paragraph. Let's read it and find the answer. A great white shark has never been observed giving birth. However, pregnant females have been caught. The great white shark is known to be ovoviviparous. Young develop in eggs within the mother's body. Inside the parenthesis you have the definition. So ovoviviparous means where the young develop in eggs inside the mother's body, within the mother's body. So going back to the question, let's see which option is correct. It refers to animals whose young develop in eggs within the mother's body. Option A is correct. This is the skill of scanning that we are using. We are reading the question, we need a specific piece of information. We go back to the passage and find that piece of information and come back and tick or choose the correct option. Question number 6. You would have something in common with the great white shark if you... Now you have to read the whole passage very closely to find the answer to this question. So let's go back to the passage and see if there is anything related to this. Let's quickly read the options first. Located your food by sound. Have 4 brothers and 4 sisters. Spend most of your time near the shore. Lived to be 40 years old. Now for this you have to scan through the whole passage to find the answer. Let's go back to the passage and see where we can find the answer to this question. Now the first option was if you located your food by sound. Let's go to the paragraph that is titled Diet so that we understand what we have to talk about. For question number 5, we have to find the answer by going through the whole passage and see which option is most closely related. The first option is if you located your food by sound, and we know that sharks do that. So if you would be having something in common with the shark if you do that. Second option is if you have 4 sisters and 4 brothers, and we have nothing of that sort in the passage. We are not told how many family members one shark group or one shark community has. And the next option was spend most of your time near the shore, and this is totally improbable because sharks, great white sharks never spend their time near the shore. They are mostly or almost always found in open waters, that is deep water, because it's such a huge animal, sea animal, that it cannot be closer to the shore. It's dangerous for their life. And the last one is lived to be 80 years old. It is very clearly written in the passage that most sharks, in the reproduction paragraph, that it is thought that great white sharks live up to 40 years in the wild, but this estimate may be too low. So it simply cannot be 80. So going back to our question, we see that option number A is most likely to be correct. Located your food by sound. That is one thing that you can have common with the shark, because they do it, and with the electromagnetic rays, they understand, or they realize that there is an animal closer to them underwater that they can attack and hunt and eat as food. Moving on to question number 7. In which of the following places would you have the best chance to see a great white shark? Now the answer to this question must lie in the heading or in the paragraph of habitat. Going back to that paragraph, let's read it. Great white sharks are most commonly observed throughout the world's subarctic coastal waters, though they likely spend most of their time in the open ocean. Highest concentrations, we are talking about highest concentration, where the most number of sharks is found. So this is where you can find the answer, are found in the waters off the coast of South Africa, Australia, California and Mexico. Now let's see if we have any one of these options in the question options. A is Antarctica, Mississippi River, coastal South Africa, Mediterranean Sea, and we have coastal South Africa here in option as option number C. So option C for question number 7 would be correct. I hope your answers are coming correct. Number 8, sharks often mistake humans for. Now this must be in the paragraph of attack or the way they hunt. The last paragraph, shark attacks. Despite the fear of great white sharks, at least in part generated by Steven Spielberg's 1975 movie Jaws, great white sharks do not target humans as prey. It's very clearly written in the passage that great white sharks almost never attack humans. So sharks often mistake humans for, this is what we will find. By going back to the passage, most attacks are attributed to mistaken identity. Sharks can easily mistake humans for seals. So the dash that is there in front of that question, here you will add seals, and that is your correct answer. Which of the following is not true? Question number 9. Now you have to find something that is false. So this not true can be a little misleading. You have to be very careful. Let's read the options carefully. Great white sharks often target humans as prey. Great white sharks employ different hunting techniques depending on the prey they are stalking. Great white sharks swallow their own teeth during attacks. D, great white sharks can detect prey by smell or by magnetic field. Now we see that option D is true. It's not false, so it's not the correct answer, because sharks detect their prey by smell and electromagnetic rays. C, great white sharks swallow their own teeth during attacks. We read under the paragraph under the heading of shark attacks that most of the times sharks are so violent attacking their prey that they sometimes even swallow their own teeth during the attack. This is also something true, and we are looking for something not true. Option B, great white sharks employ different hunting techniques depending on the prey they are stalking. Yes, this is also true. So the only option that is left that is untrue, that is not true, is great white sharks often target humans as prey. We just read in the paragraph that they never target humans as prey. It is because of the mistaken identity. They think that it is a seal, so they go over and attack, and then it is found that it was a human. Last question is, which of the following may or may not be true? Now, it can be true and it cannot be true. It's clearly written in the passage. Let's read the options. The great white shark is actually only white on its underparts. Newborn great white sharks are about 5 feet in length. Option C, great white sharks have serrated teeth that act like saws. And option D, great white sharks have a lifespan of 40 years. Now that we have read the whole passage about once, twice or thrice, we know which option is may or may not be true. The great white shark is actually only white on its underparts. That is correct. That is always true. So there is no yes or no thing here that this is not correct. Newborn great white sharks are about 5 feet in length. That is also true. That is a very correct statistic. Great white sharks have serrated teeth that act like saws. That is also right. And the only thing that may or may not be true is that great white sharks have a lifespan of 40 years. Going back to the passage of reproduction, it is clearly written here. It is thought that great white sharks live up to 40 years in the wild, but this estimate may be too low. So this particular phrase, may be too low, gives us a clear idea that it may or may not be true. So your option number A is correct in question number 10. Now I want all of you to look at your activity and see how many questions you have correct and write them and on the top of your page. Now, with the help of this activity, we understood how we use the skills of skimming and scanning, how we read the questions and go back to the passage and find the answers. And there are certain questions that are a little confusing in a way that they ask you about something that is not true, instead of saying just choose the option that is false. So not true can confuse you a little bit, so be very careful about that. And this activity also helps us understand that we have to read the passage at least 3 times to get the basic or clear or complete understanding of what it is talking about. After the first activity, you have a very clear idea how you have to read the passage. Go back to the questions, read them very carefully, read the options, and then come back to the passage and find the answer. Now here is another activity that has a smaller passage and slightly lesser questions as compared to the previous one. This is harsh interrogation methods by the United States, by the US. We'll read the passage and then answer the questions. You'll be given 10 minutes to read the passage, then read the questions and do your activity, and then one by one we'll look at the questions, come back to the paragraph, read it again and find the answers. And with this you can check whether your answers were correct or not. The paragraph is basically a newspaper article. It's about the harsh interrogation methods used by the United States forces in Iraq, in Afghanistan and other countries. And the United States forces are being criticized on the interrogation methods, the violent and cruel interrogation methods that they are using, and the impact of these methods on the people who are being affected by them, and the agencies, human rights agencies. And even in America there is a lot of hue and cry about the interrogation methods that are being used in the detention centers by the United States forces. So the paragraph basically, the passage basically is a newspaper article. It gives you important names as well. There are things said by important people, and we'll read the passage. You must have done that. We'll go to the questions and read them one by one and get the answers. According to this article, question number 1, apart from making the United States look bad, what do harsh interrogation methods do? You must have read the passage very carefully. It's very simple. What can be the answer? Answer is option number B. They put US soldiers at risk. It is not just about getting the information from the people who are terrorists or who are doing wrong things in the society, creating violence and all. It's about putting US soldiers at risk. They ensure, option A was, they ensure that US soldiers are treated with respect. Of course, this simply cannot be the correct answer. And C is, they get the job done. The answer to this question is found in your paragraph number 1. The use by the United States of harsh interrogation methods against suspected terrorists has stained the country's image and is putting US soldiers' lives at risk. It has ruined the reputation of the country and it has put the soldiers' lives at risk. So this is where you find the answer of question number 1. Option B is correct. Question number 2. Ken Robinson believes that hardball interrogation tactics, option A, simply don't work. B, work well with some prisoners. C, should be used with caution. Now let's go back to the paragraph and see where the answer lies. What Ken Robinson said is found in paragraph number 2. Our place in the world has been eroded by the use of torture in interrogation at war on terror prisons in Afghanistan, Iraq and Guantanamo Bay, said Ken Robinson, who served for 20 years in organizations including the Central Intelligence Agency and National Security Agency. We have lost the moral high ground, he said. Furthermore, the expert said hardball interrogation tactics don't work. So this is the answer to our question. Option A, question number 2 is correct. Question number 3. Sarah Mendelson thinks that the Bush administration, option A, is very conscious of US obligations under international human rights and humanitarian law. B, hasn't done enough to make sure harsh interrogation methods are not used. Option C, implemented suggestions given by lawyers from all branches of the military. And we have to go back to the passage and find the answer to this question. Let's see where the answer to the question lies. We have information about Sarah Mendelson in the 3rd paragraph of your passage. Let's read it and find the answer. Sarah Mendelson of the Center for Strategic and International Studies, which hosted the forum along with Human Rights First, deplored the US administration's new ambivalence towards torture prohibition. In a report, she accused the administration of President George W. Bush of appearing increasingly prepared to pay lip service to or ignore entirely the US obligations under international human rights and humanitarian law. Now, we understand that Sarah Mendelson is criticizing the US administration, the President George W. Bush's administration, about use of harsh interrogation methods. Now, looking at the options, let's see which one is correct. Option A is very conscious of US obligations under international human rights and humanitarian law. It is not. We just read that Sarah Mendelson said that she was critical of Bush's administration during those times. Option B is hasn't done enough to make sure harsh interrogation methods are not used. So option B here is correct because Sarah Mendelson clearly says that Bush administration is not doing anything. They are just providing lip service to say that they are criticizing or they don't agree with the harsh interrogation methods, but in fact they haven't done enough. So option B here is correct. Joe Navarro believes that hurting someone, question number 4, Joe Navarro believes that hurting someone, option A, will not make them want to talk in the future. B, will make them cooperative in the future. C, is a part of the normal interrogation process. Now let's go back to the passage and find the answer to this question. About Joe Navarro, we have in the 2nd paragraph, almost in the middle, we know that anytime you hurt someone, you make them reticent to talk in future. You make them reticent to talk in future. You may not know the meaning of reticent, but you quickly open up the dictionary, try to find out the meaning, and as I told you about the context clues, trying to understand or guess the meaning of vocabulary that you have not heard before, that you're not familiar with, you can do that here. That skill is applied. We know that anytime you hurt someone, you make them reticent to talk in future. Reticent means to hide your feelings, not to show your feelings what they are, to try to hide your feelings from others. That is what reticent means. So the option that we have correct is option A. Joe Navarro believes that hurting someone will not make them want to talk in the future. Of course, when you torture them, when you hurt them, you give them physical pain, and to that level that they lose consciousness or something, they will never talk again. They will hate you, and they won't say what you want them to say. Now, question number 5 is quite simple. Which country is not mentioned in the article? You should know the answer. You have read the passage. Option A is Afghanistan, option B, Iraq, option C, Iran. Now we clearly very well know, very good, you are correct. Option C is correct because Iran has not been mentioned in the passage. Option C will be correct. This was second activity that we did today for lecture number 2. You used the skill of skimming and scanning both, going back to the paragraph, finding the answers, and then choosing the correct options. I hope all your answers are correct. This was a slightly easier passage. We'll be moving on to some difficult ones in the coming activities. Now we move on to our last activity for lecture number 2. We just finished a paragraph on a reading passage on harsh interrogation methods used by the United States Army in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we finished 5 questions appended to it, and I hope most of the answers with you were correct. Moving on to our last activity. This is the paragraph. It is titled Using Real Animals in Movies. This is a very interesting, very light-hearted passage. You must have watched the movie Rise of the Planet of the Apes. You will be given 10 minutes to read the passage very carefully according to the 3 steps that I gave you in lecture number 1 about how to try to read and comprehend the passage in a better way. You will be given 10 minutes, and then we'll go over to the questions. You will do the questions yourself first, and then we'll analyze the passage and see how many questions you did correctly. Now that you have read the passage, let's go over to the questions and see how many you got correct. Question number 1 is, according to the article, animal rights activist dash the fact that there were no real apes used in the new Rise of the Planet of the Apes movie. Now, in the first paragraph of the passage, you read very clearly what was the reaction of animal rights activists when they saw the movie Rise of the Planet of the Apes. That helps you, the information, the piece of information that helps you answer this question easily is in paragraph 1. The sign that an animal right activist was holding was, what it said was, thank you for not using real apes. So it means that they were happy that real apes were not used in the movie. Let's see which option is close. Option A, are appalled by, B, are ambivalent to, C, like. So if you put option C in the blank here, it will be correct. According to the article, animal rights activists dash the fact, like the fact that there were no real apes used in the new Rise of the Planet of the Apes movie. Option C is correct. Now, appalled means they were shocked. Ambivalent means they didn't know what their reaction was. They were half way for yes and halfway for no. They were not clear about it. This is what it means. So option A and B is not correct. Option C is correct because they hailed the fact that there were no real apes used in the movie. So option C is correct for question number 1. Question number 2. What kind of apes did the above mentioned movie use? Option A, real ones. Option B, computer generated ones. Option C, cardboard cutouts. Now the answer to this question lies in paragraph number 2. The creative team behind apes used motion capture technology to create digitized primates, spending tens of millions of dollars on technology that records an actor's performance and later layers it with computer graphics to create a final image. So the apes that were used were computer generated ones. Option B will be correct here. Question number 3. According to the article, Hollywood movies have been dash. Option A, shying away from using live animals lately, treating all live animals well in the past little while, using lots of live animals lately and not always treating them properly. The answer to this question can be found in paragraph number 2 of your passage. Let's go back to the paragraph and passage and see whether we find the answer or not. Yet apes is more exception than the rule. In fact, paragraph number 3, Hollywood has been hot on live animals lately. The non-profit American Humane Association, which monitors the treatment of animals, is filmed entertainment, is keeping tabs on more than 2,000 productions this year, 100 more than in 2010. Already a number of high-profile 2011 films, including Water for Elephants, The Hangover Part 2 and Zookeeper, have drawn the ire of activists who say the creatures featured in them haven't been treated properly. So it proves that the Hollywood has not been very good at treating the animals properly. So the option number C would be correct, using lots of live animals lately and not always treating them properly. Question number 4. Why are animal rights activists worried about US movies that are shot overseas? Option A, because the way the animals are treated overseas is sometimes not as closely monitored as in the US, because they don't want foreign workers to be hired. Option B. Option C, because they don't want foreign animals to be used in American movies. Now let's see where we find the answer to this question. In the last paragraph, in some cases it's not so much the treatment of the animals on set that has activists worried. It's the offset training and living conditions that are raising concerns, and there are questions about US films made overseas which sometimes are not monitored as closely as productions films state-wise. So going back to the questions, we see that our option number A is correct, because the way the animals are treated overseas is sometimes not as closely monitored as in the US, because when they are making a film in their own country, the associations that are animal activist associations, they can go over and monitor how the real animals are treated. But the movies that are being made overseas, the process of monitoring is not as proficient as possible. So option A is correct. Option B. How much money did the makers of The Rise of the Planet of Apes spend on the motion capture technology used in the movie? The answer is quite simple, because we already have read it here in paragraph number 2. The creative team behind apes used motion capture technology to create digitized primates, spending tens of millions of dollars. Now this question is a little confusing in the sense that you have to use your maths. Tens of millions of dollars, let's go back to the question and see. Tens of thousands of dollars, that's definitely incorrect. Over this amount that is written there, or about $2,000. Option A and B are definitely incorrect, so option B is correct, because this is the amount in figures that has been given in words in our paragraph. This is tens and millions of dollars in words, and this is tens and millions of dollars in figures. So option B is correct. And with this activity, we come to the end of our lecture number 2. I hope you have understood everything we talked about. These are activities that will gradually become a little more complicated. The coming lectures would have a little complicated activities. The passages would be longer. So it's better that you revise these activities again. Go through the mistakes that you have done, see why you made those mistakes, try to enhance your skills with the help of the activities that are already there. These activities can be downloaded from our portal easily, and you can ask any questions as well. So just to recapitulate or summarize or revise what we have done today, we started off with previewing. That is a very important skill in reading comprehension. We look at the passage. Even before reading it, we try to understand what the passage can be about by looking at the title, by looking at the section headings, by looking at the topic sentences of the paragraphs. Then we talked about reading for main idea. Reading for main idea is an important skill because there is always one question on what the passage is basically about whenever you go for a reading comprehension exercise. So it's good that you revise this skill because one question will always be correct with this. Next one is making inferences and drawing conclusions. I gave you very clear examples of how you can understand the meaning of an unfamiliar word or an idea by guessing its meaning and drawing conclusions from the passage or surrounding language. And then we did 3 exercises, 3 reading comprehension exercises that we were explained to you. You were given 10 minutes and you read the passage and answered the questions. I hope you have understood today's lecture. We'll see you in the next lecture. Thank you.